Good evening. I think we still have a couple of minutes to go. So we should be starting in last one more minute, exactly at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, I can see all our panelists have joined. I can see Swati ji, Mr. Prabhakar joined as well. Savitri ma'am, you are there too. And Sarika ji joined too. And Rachna Iyer also is joined. So I think all of the panelists are there. I'm just waiting for last one more minute of wait. And exactly at 6, we'll give it a start. Right, so my system says it's 6 o'clock and therefore we start. So good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to have you all here today. And I must first of all
Recording in
say,
progress.
that besides the participants who are joining us on Zoom, for which we selected or we sent only select invites, rest of the people have joined YouTube, which is also playing live this entire session. So there are plenty of people, I guess, on the YouTube channel as well. Let me first of all start welcoming our panelists here today. And it's because of the panelists that we've been able to draw such tremendous crowds. I must also say that we are joined not just by CSR professionals, but also by NGOs, for whom we extended a special invitation, as these are the people who are actual carriers of CSR efforts. They are the ones who are the real heroes who take CSR expenditure to the place where it deserves to go. Minus the NGOs, CSR would have been actually spent on music parties and feasts, and the NGOs have made it possible to take it to the last mile. So thanks all for joining us today. Let me just first start by introducing our panelists today. Let me start by first introducing Savitri Parekh, ma'am. Savitri Parekh is the company secretary and compliance officer of the largest CSR spender in the country, and no guesses required for that, Reliance Industries. She's a voracious speaker and an author. I think today probably it might be a third meeting for the day. She addresses plenty of meetings throughout the day and has authored several books, the ones that I'm aware of. And my knowledge about her books is still quite, dangerously limited. She wrote a book on LODR. She wrote a book on, she was one of the revising editors of Ramayani's Act. She was also revising editor of MC Bandari's Company Law Procedures. I also specially want to say that she is a made in Kolkata product. Savitri ji, welcome today. And the next, I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Prabhakar from ITC, another big spender on CSR among the top 10 CSR spenders in the country. ITC is one. And Mr. Prabhakar has been leading the so-called social investment division of ITC. Others would probably call it CSR spending. But in right spirit of the term, ITC calls it social investment. After all, it's investment in the society. As Mr. Prabhakar has been leading that effort. In addition, Mr. Prabhakar is on the CII's CSR panel. He's on a whole lot of other panels as well. And Mr. Prabhakar, thank you very much for being a part of this panel today. The next, I go to introduce Swati Gotham. Swati ji is someone that anyone in Calcutta wouldn't have missed the hoardings all over the city, where she supplies the so-called brazen necessities for all women in the city and of course across the country. I guess she's exporting as well. But we know Swati ji as also a commentator and a columnist in Telegraph. She, among the things that I would like to introduce about her, is the fact that she's also leading an NGO, all women NGO called Pukar. And Pukar has been traveling all the way to rural West Bengal, to small villages, let alone roads or electricity. Even probably she's hardly think of even carrying a car over there because the places are completely remote. Sometimes even several modes of transport, including boats, she might be traveling to reach those places. So Swati has been doing wonderful work in carrying CSR to the people who need it most. Swati ji, welcome very much. The next, I have the pleasure of introducing Sarika Gosai. Sarika ji, I heard her, I think almost about a few months back in Faridabad, one of the NCR panel discussions. And I realized that she's the one who lives and breathes ESG. She talks about ESG all the time. She's ESG specialist, talks about sustainability, talks about climate change, talks about matters which are extremely important today. And she is the very important bridge between ESG and CSR, if at all there is any kind of a divide between the two. Sarika is the one who is able to bridge the two. Sarika is also a chartered accountant and the company secretary. She speaks at SOCHM, she speaks at ICAI, she speaks at ICSI, so speaks at plenty of forums. Sarika ji, welcome to this forum today. The last but not the least, I have the pleasure of introducing Rachana Iyer. Rachana is heading the CSR function at IDFC First Bank. And she has done her graduation from Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has handled social impact work, not just in India, but in several countries. Rachana brings us rich experience of CSR work here today in the panel discussion. Rachana ji, thank you very much. With this introduction to our panelists today, I must start introducing our colleague Pemi Jaiswal with radiating smile on the screen. So Pemi is the author who has written the book that we're going to launch today on CSR practitioner's perspective. Pemi has been a wonderful part of our team for almost like 8 years now and currently designated as partner with Vinod Kothari & Company. Pemi has been assisted in this work on the book by another young colleague of ours, Payal, if you can show yourself up, Payal Agarwal. Payal is another very, very promising colleague and has long years to go with us. Payal has also assisted Pemi in writing this book, and not being content with this one, she's now on her another work, which I'm not going to disclose today for reasons of confidentiality. But that's Payal Agarwal, our another colleague. I must also welcome Mr. Ashok Jaiswal and Mrs. Jaiswal, Pemi's father and mother, who are proud parents who joined today. And likewise, Mr. Rajesh Agarwal and Mrs. Agarwal, who are proud parents of Payal, who also have joined today. And I cannot express how happy parents would be seeing the daughters come up with flying colors. When my books I used to carry to my father used to say in Rajasthan. So whenever I used to carry my books to show to him, the thing that he would always do is to carry the book to his shop, and he was just used to show it to all the people around the entire mandi. He would carry the book showing to people, देखो मेरे के लड़के ने किताब लिखी है. So that I can understand how proud he was at demonstrating the book. So Ashok sir and Rajesh sir and Mrs. Jaiswal and Mrs. Agarwal, we know how proud you are. So thank you very much. आज आप हमारे साथ आए, हमारा बड़ा सौभाग्य है. आप अपनी बेटियों का लिखा हुआ पब्लिकेशन लॉन्च होते हुए देखेंगे, तो हमें बड़ा खुशी लग रहा है इस बात का. Ladies and gentlemen and all our panelists, let's first start by doing a little launch of the book on CSR written by colleagues. So if all the colleagues can kindly hold the book in the hands. Thanks a lot. And congratulations from all of us, Pemi and Payal, congratulations. Would you want to say a word, Pemi? Or you are short of words?
Of course, I think I'm short of words. I can just say that I'm blessed that I have you as my mentor. I have the blessings of my parents. And it's a long way to go, and I'm extremely overwhelmed to speak any further.
Which is how I expect you would be. And both Pemi and Payal, this is one of the, I would say, lot many launches that you would probably do in future. So wish you all the very best for this, and congratulations once again. With this, we will be starting a panel discussion. And let me first start by asking a question which I would want to ask Savitri ji as also Mr. Prabhakar. We are almost 10 years now since the 2013 law was enacted in the country, and India became arguably the only country in the world at that time, at least, to introduce CSR as a statutory obligation. Now, it's not that companies like Reliance and ITC were not doing social work before. As I think everyone knows, ITC was well into a lot of rural development work. I surely can recall Chopal, and I can recall rural development efforts of ITC around, I think, 2009, 8, or 8, 9, when we were associated doing some work for ITC. And Reliance as well was doing a whole lot of social work. So there was innate social responsibility as a part of social ecosystem. Companies used to take themselves as part of the citizens of the corporate world, and would carry CSR as a part of that innate, inherent obligation to give back to society. Then came the law which cast CSR as an obligation. Initially, it was comply or explain, and later on became an obligation. Not just obligation, but it came replete with penal provisions. And now, as we can see, the ROCs across the country have been adjudicating, passing adjudication orders, punishing companies for failing to do CSR, even failing in terms of time and depositing CSR money to the so-called separate account. And adjudication orders have been passed imposing fullest penalty on companies. So this change from CSR as a purely innate sense of responsibility versus CSR as a statutory obligation. Savitriji, how do you perceive this? Is it something that you would call a positive change, or you would think, well, companies would have still been seen as spending on a social cause in a social way instead of doing it a legal way, as the statutory obligation made it a kind of obligation to sort of wriggle out a way to comply with the law, or is it still coming as a part of the inner self, a social responsibility? Savitriji, over to you.
Sure. First of all, hearty congratulations to Pami and to Payal, and also a wonderful time for both the families, and all of us are joining here with you in these moments of happiness. And I must also thank Vinodji, one, for giving me this opportunity to address this seminar, and secondly, to also be the first amongst the first ones to receive this book. Before I answer the question, let me tell you, whenever I see a book, I spend some time reading the index page, because that's actually a page which gives clarity on the flow of the book. And I must very openly acknowledge and congratulate you, saying that your clarity of thought has come out beautifully. It has been wonderfully expressed in the first few pages of the index page. I would confess I've not finished reading the book, which I shall do, and it shall find a very good place of pride in my room at Reliance Industries. Now, to answer your question, I think all corporate entities carry a duty as a corporate citizen. And therefore, if you look at it as a duty of a corporate citizen, penal provision is something which gets attracted if you have not fallen in line. Penal provision is not what you read when you look at what you need to comply. In terms of the amount, it's only a small amount of the net profits of the last 3 years, average net profit, and of course there are some deductions. It's not so much about the deduction; it's more about what you need to comply and how you comply. If you approach it from a perspective of an opportunity to be able to make societal change, I would say it's a very welcome provision. And I'm glad India has been the front runner and the country which has shown the way to the rest of the world as to how a law can be made very effective to take care of welfare means also. Typically, everyone would generally say that welfare expenditure should be made only by the state, but that's not so. You would always want everything around you to be done in a good way, and this is an opportunity. And therefore, I would not look at it in terms of penalty. However, I would also add that before the transition, that is before January 2021, where the penal provisions were a little too stringent, that has the decriminalization provision which of course the law had not come into effect. It was still in that stage, and now it is only a penalty, which is of course a welcome move. In case there is a genuine problem in a company, they of course need to then fall under the penal provisions and pay the penalty. So I would say that it's an opportunity to be able to make societal change, and it is welcome. In terms of the number of areas which can be covered, which presently is under Schedule 7, I think that's a different point altogether. Over to you, Vinodji.
Thanks, Ram. That's very, very positive way to start this event. Mr. Prabhakar, what would be your same question, your
Sure.
thoughts?
Okay, firstly, my heartiest congratulations to Pammy and Payal. I think I've been relatively new to this space, and I don't think I've found a more comprehensive book than this. And I think it's a book, and I think that's where the skill of the author comes in. The beauty of the book is it's as relevant for somebody who is intending to get into the space of CSR as much as somebody who probably has spent decades in the CSR space. It's equally relevant for everybody. What I liked also is the way you've given working templates, built out scenarios. So when you look at your whole chapter on impact assessments, for example, different levels of impact assessments, what's the way you can do it? It's like a treatise, so to say, actually. So my heartiest congratulations. And I think, Vinodji, you also deserve a credit for supporting them and mentoring them for coming out with a book like this. And my recommendation would be it should be on the desk of every CSR professional, every academic institute that teaches CSR as a subject, and surely the government departments. And I'm sure that they will come very, very fast. Now, coming back to the question that you've raised, yes, as you said, companies like Reliance, Tata's, ITCs have already been doing this for decades and maybe much, much earlier also. While there is this whole feeling that the statutory requirement is a cumbersome requirement, it's a painful requirement, I look at it in a different way, Vinodji. I'm a HR professional. Just like we talk of well-being of a community, when we talk of well-being of an employee, there also you have the rules, whether it's a Provident Fund or ESI or everything, there are rules, statutory provisions for corporates to do it. So if it can be for the well-being of an employee, I see nothing wrong for it for the well-being of the community. So that's one perspective. The second perspective that I wanted to sort of share is this will prepare organizations which were not thinking of doing CSR for future. And when I say for future, driven by two aspects. They have to meet their social commitments and environmental commitments. There will be requirements in terms of reportings and disclosures. Now, if this had not been done, they would have been unprepared for all of this when it would have come very sudden. And that would have impacted their sustenance and competitiveness per se. So in a sense, it's preparing Indian organizations, especially the small organizations or medium-sized organizations. The third thing that I see is it's brought in some sort of discipline, whether it's discipline of time, discipline of where you invest, where you spend, and how you actually do the entire governance part of it. Very, very often we sort of miss out on the governance part of it. When today you're reporting, you're talking of boards involvement, etc., you're actually aligning the entire organization so that right from top to bottom, everybody takes ownership and commitment. So I see it really a positive step in the right direction.
Prabhakar, thanks very much. First of all, thanks for the feedback on the book. We are indeed delighted to hear your compliments. And I must say to all the participants here as well that the book runs over more than 500 pages. And the specialty is that for every topic, there is, as Mr. Prabhakar mentioned, there is a working guidance. There are frequently asked questions. There are formats. There are templates for just about a complete package of whatever every practitioner would need. It's not limited to CSR, the legal aspects only. It goes into the taxation aspects. It probably has a chapter on accounting as well. It spends a bit on the GST implications of CSR. So almost anything that anyone would look forward to understanding in terms of CSR is sort of bundled into this single volume. Prabhakar sir, thank you very much. Prabhakar sir, thank you also very much for equating CSR with employee welfare. As you rightly mentioned, companies and employer could have been expected to be oriented towards the welfare of the employees, but there's a statute which forces them to do so. And you rightly mentioned that this brings the required discipline, because after all, when you talk about a system, you talk about a system which is serving the society. It has to be in a certain manner with a certain degree of obligations and into a defined set of activities which would qualify to be the so-called CSR activities. You rightly mentioned about the governance aspect as well, because we have a CSR committee that oversees the entire effort, which also has independent directors, so that the board cannot exactly do what shoots the wishes of the promoters. And then you got a CSR nodal cell, and you got an impact assessment. You probably got a need assessment also sometimes for major CSR expenditure. There'll be some sort of need assessment as well. So that's entire system of CSR spending which is disciplined into this piece of law. I'm circling back to Savitri ji and Prabhakar sir once again on another relevant and similar question once again. Now, while CSR is therefore, as you both of you agreed, cast upon companies as an obligation, a CSR is also some way connected with the business model of the company. And different companies have different business models, and their social obligations are in a way connected with what do they do. So if the business model, for example, depletes the environment, the effort should be directed more towards replenishing the environment. If companies have a lot of let's say symbiotic relation with the society, the effort should be more towards community developments and so on. So CSR is not merely adding to the requisite number by looking at item number 1 to 17 in the list, and probably little there add up to the target number. CSR has to be a part of the overall corporate strategy. Are companies seeing CSR as a strategic initiative, or companies are simply I mean, and of course, this would differ from company to company, but in your experience, sitting
Sure.
where you are companies looking at CSR as a strategic initiative or simply adding up to a target number? Savitri, first you, and then I'll come to Prabhakar.
Sure. I think that's a very interesting question. Let me put it this way: if you are spending maybe anything more than a crore, and I'm actually taking 1 crore just as a figurative number here, it is very essential to see what benefit you're getting, and which is the reason this term impact assessment which has been brought in. And as you rightly said, need assessment and impact assessment, just to see as to what the need in a particular place is. Typically you would find that there are three main heads where most of the CSR expenditure is presently happening: education, the other one is rural development, and which would include a large range of issues there, as well as healthcare. And along with this, there would be, the other area which is emerging is sports also, because everyone is conscious of this fact that India must earn more medals, because it is not a dearth of talent here, but I think we should just give them the opportunity. But let me look at rural development. In fact, during the pandemic, we did see a lot of the people migrating back to the rural areas for obvious economic reasons, and there was no way that they could sustain themselves in the urban areas. But when they went back, because of the CSR activities done by large organizations in particular, they realized that they could actually take care of themselves by staying in those villages rather than coming back to town, which also helped in reverse migration. And this has actually been very good for India. And sustainable livelihoods, these are areas where large organizations have been focusing, which is paying rich dividends. It is impacting the lives in a very positive way of people who are benefited by these initiatives. In fact, looking at alternative sources of gainfully being employed, it is not necessary that everyone comes to town, works in factories. So this is happening presently in India. Coming back to the specific question, is it necessary to have a strategic approach to this? Answer is 100% yes. Otherwise, just spreading yourself thin on 10 different areas will not lead to any of this going up. Let me give a concrete example. Let's say, for example, if one were to be spending money on vocational training, I would say it is necessary to see as to what the end result is going to be. Is it to ensure sustainable employment, or is it just to ensure that the education level in a particular locality goes up? The two would have ultimately, in the long run, very different benefits, which one would get to see. Both are definitely not wrong, but at the same time, if one were to look at it in terms of being able to give the right kind of opportunity for them to be able to focus on that, then the approach would be very different. And unless all this is planned beforehand, it will not be very easy. Similarly, for example, if one were to be looking at agriculture, one would say that it is necessary to build check dams or maybe create better water availability. And the measure for this would be to see as to how the water table has moved up. And unless and until the objective is very clearly defined beforehand, unless the parameters are properly put in place beforehand, you would not be able to measure it. And as all of us would certainly agree, what is not measured very often is not done. So, therefore, I would say that a strategic approach is essential. It has to start with need gap analysis, and you need to have very clear parameters defined beforehand. And at the end of it, you also need to do impact assessment. Mandatorily, impact assessment is required to be done. If the expenditure is more than 10 crores and one per project, that's a different issue altogether. Even a basic dipstick to see as to whether what is being done is actually yielding results or not is, I would say, impact assessment in the smallest of microcosm example of it, which should be definitely taken note of and done. And this is an opportunity, if done in the right way, is definitely going to yield very good results. So, starting with need gap analysis, ending with impact assessment, with monitoring as you go along, is definitely imperative. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Prabhakar sir, before I move to you, I just want to add a couple of points just to instigate you to maybe say further on this. I am aware of some of the companies where CSR would probably include some bit on water, some bit on education, some bit on, let's say, planting trees, and some bit on, let's say, taking people to rural places, etc., etc. So, as Savitri ma'am was saying, people spread themselves so very thin that they end up achieving nothing. I'm also aware of a large company which probably dedicated some bit of funds for rural education, but rural education, as you might imagine, the needs are massive, and therefore the funding requirement would be equally massive. Unless we have sufficient corpus dedicated to such a massive need as rural education, will not be able to achieve the desired results. So unless it has the required publicity, people get to know that there is a company offering education, let's say for free to the masses, and therefore there adequate infrastructural expenditure as well, you would not end up achieving anything at all. So our companies, and larger companies of course are different, but our companies in general, to your knowledge, Mr. Prabhakar, are they sort of picking up out of the 17 activities from the schedule, are they picking up things which suit the business model the most, or are they simply randomizing their expense some way to comply with the statutory requirement? Prabhakar sir.
I guess I will let me sort of where am I coming from? So I've had the opportunity to sort of be part of the ICSI jury for CSR awards for the last 2 years. And I've had a chance to see both large, medium, and small enterprises. I wouldn't say that companies are just spending randomly. But what is happening probably is when you're smaller companies, when you have a budget of 5 crores, 10 crores sort of a thing, it probably goes to sectors like education, health, but could be more in the form of a give rather than an investment as a project over a long-term period. To that extent, it may not be strategic. When you move to companies, let's say, where the spends could be 50 crores or something, there it could look like they're spending on multiple activities per se, but they at least bring in the dimension of trying to invest it in a meaningful manner in terms of impact and need, etc. So to me, it's more linked to the size of the pool that is available with you. Second, do you really have the resources to do it properly? Now, imagine if there are smaller organizations who have to meet with this, but they really don't have any team or wherewithal. It's being given as a responsibility along with maybe company secretary or as a HR or corporate communications. You do a whole lot of other things. So then you don't sort of get into a strategic way. I just wanted to leave a thought even for those organizations. How can it be sort of aligned to a strategic imperative? I think the first one I would say is, and I'm taking the ITC example here, Vinodji. The first is, am I focusing in the catchments where I operate, whether it's the factory catchments or the agri catchments? The moment I do in those, in a way, it's strategic for the business because business cannot succeed in societies that fail. If I have to earn the right to operate a factory in a particular area, I need to do good for the society. So the choice of catchment itself becomes a strategic this thing. The second element of strategic is, are they in some way aligned to some strengths of the organization? Or are they aligned some way to the value chains of the organization? Now, as Swatiji mentioned, and if you look at the data also, Savitriji mentioned that a lot of spend is going in education and health. But if you have to analyze the spend of ITC, our bigger spends have been on aspects related to nature and environment, whether it's water, biodiversity, forestry, climate smart agriculture, because that is the value chain where we are present. We understand the value chain. We can leverage the domain knowledge that is residing internally, and therefore you can do it in a much more effective manner. The third element of strategic, which I would like to emphasize, which is what Savitriji also alluded, any intervention or any spend done without a desire to create an impact, a measurable impact, again, is not strategic. It might be for a good cause, but it's not strategic. The last one that I would say is, for it to be strategic, it has to be based on a need and not based on what you and me feel like, okay, I'm interested in this area, I'm interested in, let's say, arts and music. I'll give it to arts and music, though it may not have relevance to my catchment or my value chain or my domain knowledge per se. So these are the four elements that I think even a smaller organization can put through a filter and ensure it becomes a strategic spend, actually.
Very well put. Thanks you very much, because this is exactly what, I mean, I would have actually thought of getting from you in terms of a message for everyone that CSR, rightly speaking, has to be some way connected with the value chain. And that brings us naturally to Sarika ji. Sarika ji does a lot of work around ESG and business responsibility and sustainability. And as everyone here would know, that what in India is known as BRSR is globally termed as CSR. The European Union's, for example, CSR directive is actually what we have as BRSR in India. So Sarika ji, according to you, in India, there is a little gap between our understanding of CSR and understanding of BRSR. The two have developed parallelly. Are you happy with the situation where BRSR goes to listed entities, top 1000 listed companies? CSR on the other end is applicable to every company which makes profits. CSR is basically a spending requirement. BRSR is more like a reporting requirement. Are you happy with this dichotomy, or you would have rather been happier with CSR being a part of the overall BRSR, so to say? Sarika ji, over to you.
So first of all, I would like to extend my congratulations to the P Square virtually present here, Femi and Payal. And being an author by myself for Companies Act as well as Indian accounting standards, being a chartered accountant and a company secretary, I can very well understand how much efforts, energies, and concentration and time devotion it takes to put together such a big book of 500 pages plus. And that too in such a beautiful, and I must say it's so easy to read. I had honestly read a couple of pages in between, glanced through the pages and the chapters. I was so overwhelmed to see the structure. And I'm not saying just for the sake of saying, I'm saying it being an author. And I was so happy to see such a youngsters to come up with such a beautiful book in such a short span of time. And that really creates value for professionals, for NGOs and consultants like us to read through. And I think I heard somebody saying it should be there in the wardrobe of, or like rather the bookshelf of every organization. So I have kept it in my office as well. And I have ordered one more copy for home too, so that as and when I get time for bedtime reading, I can read this rather than any other novel or something like that. So my hearty congratulations again. And I wish many more books like this to see in future from your side. And I would also like to extend the congratulations to Mr. Kothari for being your true mentor. He has been my indirect mentor for so many years. He might not even know, because I have been reading his articles. I have been hearing him out in a couple of forums. So he is a true mentor to myself. So I can see that while both of you are closely working with him, why not he would guide you. So I see all the blessings flowing from him to you, and that will keep flowing. Good luck from my side. And I would like to again congratulate and everybody and out here. And I would like to extend my thanks to invite me here to share my experience. So as you know, being a chartered accountant and a company secretary, my area of focus on working and speaking has always been accounting standards, Companies Act, auditing standard. ESGs and sustainability is my new baby. And since new baby takes a little more care and time and attention, therefore 80% of my time these days is going for BRSR, ESGs, strategies, climate change. And I'm really enjoying it for one more factor, because I'm a science graduate as well. So circular economy also did work here. And now I'm utilizing all my capabilities, being a science student, being a chartered accountant and a company secretary, and now a BRSL professional too. That gave me an idea when COVID happened, not to me, but I saw a lot of hues and cries around. Then I was looking at my degree one day. I thought, what would happen to me or my degrees if something happens to me? So I wanted to give back to my society using my tools, which is my education, my degrees, and my own experience. And therefore, I'm here. And I'm always so excited to speak about these topics together, because I can speak to all the corporates, the CSR head, the legal head, and the CFOs together. And that really gives me the pleasure. So I can see a lot of CSR people here again. That is again giving me an opportunity to explore new areas. So coming back to your query or the question to me, you rightly said that CSR is already a major constituent of the business sustainability, be it any sustainability framework like integrated reporting or a GRI across the globe. India, as we all know, is already heavily regulated. And with this BRSR coming into picture for top 1,000 listed companies, together with the CSR as per Section 135 of the Companies Act, listed companies are under a mandatory sustainability regime. And the wheel would not stop here. The intention of Ministry of Corporate Affairs and SEBI is very clear that this sustainability report will keep on applying to other listed clients and unlisted clients in a roadmap. Very soon it will happen, and we will see that time in near future. So though BRSR is based on some specific 9 principles, which are India specific for sustainability, the entire BRSR is still divided into 3 components called ESG, as we all know. If we look at the sustainability part of the ESG, it can further be divided into 2 parts. One is the internal human capital, our people, our staff members, and the other one is the outside people, so to say, CSR activities which are undertaken by companies. BRSR covers a lot of disclosures and initiatives around CSR. And trust me, I am telling you with my own experience, there is a lot of thirst of the companies. They are taking equal opportunities on CSR these days. as opposed to other constituents which are divided in ESG. Therefore, it would not be wrong to say that CSR would eventually be construed as a significant part of the business sustainability very soon for Indian companies as well. And Mr. Kothari was asking, am I happy with the current way the CSR is being looked at and how it will become a major constituent of BRSR? Yes, I'm really happy because CSR has always been as compliance part of it, and with Section 135 came into picture, the penalty provisions brought into pictures for ongoing, non-ongoing thing. It was always not considered in true spirit. But while it is now covered in the total ambit of ESG, it has been beautified, I should say, putting together within the umbrella of sustainability. With this move, I'm really, really happy that the CSR part is now being looked at from a holistic angle and view by the corporates and different stakeholders. Back to you, Mr. Kothari.
Thank you, Sarika ji. Thanks a ton for those excellent words for the so-called P square, as you referred to. Rachana ji, my question to you, and with the little awareness that we have for the kind of CSR work that IDFC First Bank does, it's what we observe is that it's very different from the way other companies take it, because in IDFC First Bank, it's largely focused on employee participation in CSR efforts, labeled as lend a shoulder. It sort of has the active engagement of, I think, thousands of employees across the country of the bank, who on a weekly basis go to the target segments and do field work for people. At least in my limited knowledge, I haven't seen this kind of employee participation in CSR in a lot of companies. So Rachana ji, can you first let's maybe understand what is the philosophy behind this very different kind of a CSR work, and how easy or how difficult was to engage the employees into this creative CSR related work? Rachana ji, over to you. Rachana ji, I hope.
Yeah. Can you all hear me? Sure. Yes.
Yes, we can.
First of all, thank you so much, Vinod Kothari ji, for having me on this panel, and a very hearty congratulations to Pammy and Payal. I have the book, and I'm traveling on work now, so it's at home. My team is actually very excited for me to add it to our compendium of reads, because I think there is a dearth of literature where, in a language that's easy for a layperson to understand with examples, there's a serious dearth of literature. So we're really excited to read that book. So congrats once again. Now, to quickly jump onto your question, Vinodji, we at the bank, CSR has been something that we've been taking very, very seriously even before the merger, when we used to be Capital First. And what we learned with a very small budget in Capital First is sort of set a stone and foundation for where we are at now, and the philosophy, which is a couple of things. The first one is that how do you create social impact or environmental impact with every rupee that you spend in a way that can self-sustain a community or your target beneficiaries in the long run? With 3 to 4 crores only many years back, we had started a program where we actually set aside 15 lakhs to give grants to early stage beauticians. So these were women who had done a skilling program. They wanted to set up their own parlor, but what they were lacking was access to interest-free grants and seed capital, and they weren't yet ready they weren't ready to access bank loans at that point because the interest rates were too high and they couldn't afford it. So what we did is we did a pilot where 60 odd women got access to very small ticket size funding, anywhere between 20 to 50,000. And we actually realized that with mentorship support, with the right implementation support, and just keeping that relationship alive, we actually had a 95% recovery rate of the grant, and the grant came back to the organization, the implementation partner that we were funding, for this program, and we actually then reinvested this 15 lakhs over and over and over again every year to impact more and more women entrepreneurs. So that's just a small example of the philosophy that we run CSR with, which is how do we teach a person how to fish so that in the long run, our role as a bank or a CSR partner is redundant. Now, coming to the employee aspect, yes, we're really proud to share that we think that impact is not the responsibility of a CSR division alone. I think, and most CSR teams are very lean, as you would have seen. In some places, it's one person, in some places, it's two, max to max 3 to 4 people. And the scale of social issues is so vast that each one of us at the bank has the superpowers to create change in their own capacity, which is the thought process in creating Lend a Shoulder, where our motto goes that opportunity belongs to all and every human has the superpower to volunteer. So yes, I think what has been difficult there, actually, the challenging bit has been when we went to compliance and secretarial with this to say, hey, you know what, the laws are changing, we appreciate that, and I think it's important. Now, how do we run this deep full impact program in a way that actually qualifies as CSR as well? Because our employees are only a part of the journey. It is still a project. Now, how do we do that? So I think interpretation of the law changing so rapidly has been a challenge, but I think with the right advice and support, which Vinod Kothari and associates have been giving us, we've been able to sort of crack that and projectize it in a way that the intent is right. We're not doing this to, escape anything. I think we're only doing this to democratize doing social good and giving every employee at IDFC First Bank the pride that they have it in them to create social good as well. If that answers your question, yeah.
It does. Thank you very much. So, like she mentions, other companies would either have a so-called foundation dedicated for CSR, or probably have a CSR cell consisting of a few executives. But this wonderful thinking of CSR, which is completely employee focused, all the employees join hands for CSR work, is really commendable. We'll be circling back to you, Rachnaji, for more insights on that. But let me now turn to Swati ji. And like I mentioned, Swati is on the other side of the entire ecosystem, carrying the CSR expense to the last mile, the people who need it the most. And Swati ji, I need to understand, I think for the benefit of everyone, with the CSR mandate given by the statute, there is money changing CSR projects. There are volunteers who are prepared to do CSR work, like yourself leading a bunch of volunteers. What has been the more difficult part? Is it like the money which is difficult, or is it the volunteers are difficult, or are the difficulties of any different type that you probably would experience? I wouldn't even maybe know. And while you answer this question, can you also give a brief on the kind of CSR activities that you carry, because that's something that everyone would be interested to hear, the kind of difficulties that you face, and the way you create vocational opportunities for the women folk in the rural West Bengal with the kind of difficulties that you face over there. Swati ji, over to you.
Vinodji, thank you. And to the Dronacharya in you, and to the Bhim and Arjun in Pami and Payal, though not literally, but figuratively, because both of you are definitely not Bhim looking, but Arjun, yes. So many heartiest congratulations. May lovely such books come their way. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen on this panel, this book helps people like us, who despite having an honorary auditor and people who are working to help Pukar, nevertheless want to refer to things themselves. Now, to come back to what you said, what is it that is the greatest obstacle as far as I see? First of all, or what is it where, what are the factors which are most challenging? As you said, obstacle is the wrong word. India traditionally has always been a country of Dani people. We start from Danveer Karna in ancient history, you see. So even before all this happened, Indians have had a very clear tradition, both amongst all of them, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody in India has been very clear about giving back to society in different ways, in different times, in different contexts. Now things have become much more formalized, and a great structure has emerged, which makes it great. But I can hear, I must give a disclaimer, I can only speak from the perspective of Bengal. I have worked, I don't think I'm permitted, I can permit myself to say I worked intensively, but I worked in various parts of rural Bengal quite frequently, and to those parts where the neediest of the needy are. Okay, whilst there is social change requires intervention and help at every level, but perhaps because of the sense of philanthropy that St. Xavier's College was able to give to me, I realized as an educated woman and as a woman professional of 33 years, I now have some time and some energy to give back to the women to whom no CSR effort has ever reached. You know, when we think of sustainable change, absolutely yes. But to make that change, we first need to access those people. So if you ask me what is the most challenging in today's India, it is not the funds. It is not the availability of resources who will help you take the fund to the last mile. It is the accessing of the neediest of the needy with an accountability. I need to be accountable to the people I'm accessing. So that means identifying a village in the remotest or the tribe or the tribal hamlet where nobody has been to, ensuring that the goods we are taking are secure and are not, let's say, Bengal has a very volatile political, rural background since ages. This is a very volatile society. To ensure that any fund that comes to us goes in its entirety to the beneficiary, that is most critical. Secondly, so how have we been operating? I'm glad that between Savitri ji, Prabhakar ji, Rachana ji, Sarika ji, everybody, we've pretty much covered the 4 critical areas, which is education, health, environment, rural development, that has this great spectrum that spans a lot. Pukar certainly has this. You spoke about vocational skill development, which is why I'm mentioning this. Pukar certainly has this little goal in mind, that if we are able to ensure the littlest of livelihood for a tribal woman who will never ever have any chance at earning anything in life because the nearest main road is some many kilometers away, then I think that too is a change I would like to see happening. One of the ways in which we are trying to do it, we are embarking on these projects now, is in the tribal belt of the districts of Bankura, Jhargram, Purva Bardhaman. There is this tribal belt where women naturally are extremely in very primitive conditions. Now, employment opportunities or employment generation will not drop from trees. It is also important to take in mind the context of those villages. Electricity, nobody can guarantee. And even if we ensure that we get a connection, because Pukar for certain works with the help of the district administration to ensure 2 things: security for myself and security for the aid I'm carrying. So when Pukar identifies a village, we ensure that we visit the village with some meaningful aid, scholarship aid, nutritional aid, women-oriented, extremely needy articles that a woman may need but not be able to access. Once there, we do a little ground study. And what has emerged for rural Bengal is this. One, rural Bengal and the women in tribal areas have great access to Sal Patta and Siali Patta. The laws of the land allow them to access this resource legally. It is their right because they are the original inhabitants of those lands. There is a wonderful gentleman who I absolutely must mention here. He's now an octogenarian, I think 82 or 84, a gentleman by the name of Manoj Bhattacharya, Manoj Bhattacharya. IIT Kharagpur pass out, I think, of the early 70s. The gentleman actually has created a molding machine with a die, which is non-electrical in nature. So you use the dry leaves of the forest, which unnecessarily catch fire, and use them to fuel the machine, the die machine. You get Sal Patta, Siali Patta leaves. You have sewing machines, which are non-electrical, and a group of 10 women, an investment of 50,000 only. And those women can make Sal Patta katoris and Sal Patta plates, which are then going to be an absolute, I mean, in the years to come, thermocol and plastic has to be phased away, no matter what kind of a resistance the industry may be putting up now, but that has to go and this has to come in. So this is a project which is very low cost, which requires very little skill for the woman. In fact, Pukar has been able to identify trainers who will come and train women in every village. So let's say if we identify 30 very poor tribal women of a village, generally all the women in a tribal village are poor. Generally, I mean, a tribal village is a very, very marginalized area and place to visit. You have 3 such sets of machines. The district administration is kind of involved to ensure that these machines are not, let's say, pilfered or stolen. In any case, statistics have shown that when women are loaned anything to, they take very good care of it. They ensure there's a return. They ensure they grow it. They ensure they grow with it. So this is the kind of work that Pukar is slowly and silently trying to do. In addition, the only work we do in urban areas, the only absolute work is this. I'd like to quickly take a minute and say this, is health camps along with medicines, free medicines of all kinds, and free pathological facilities. So tests are a huge deterrent for the urban poor too. But this does not fulfill me as a person because, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I need to make a statement here. I beg pardon for anything that may not, and I welcome disagreement on this. But urban India has far, far, far much more than it can digest. And rural India, as Gandhiji had said, India resides in its villages. If we do not reach out to more and more villages, then perhaps we are not, we won't be able to do as much. Lastly, health. I feel helpless. Education, people are being able to work on. Rural development, yes. Health requires very deep pockets and great gestation. Barring the government, there is very little that can be done for health. We have, Pukar has a tie-up with a Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, official hospital, 100-bed hospital in Bengal, in Calcutta. But how do we transport rural patients to, rural women and children to Calcutta? Where do we accommodate them? How do we ensure? Now, these are things that are so needed. Health is one great weak link in Bengal and in the rest of India. I must admit that for the last 10 years, government hospitals in Bengal are functioning far, far greater than they ever did, better than they ever did. Nevertheless, they aren't enough in number. So I guess I've gone beyond the questions you asked, but back to you, Vinodji.
I think extremely well articulated, and thanks for making us wise on the tremendous gap that exists between urban India and rural India. Those who have not been to the rural parts of the country would not even be able to imagine the kind of poverty and squalor that villages are inflicted with. And it's commendable that people like you are able to beat all the odds and face all the troubles and still do wonderful work in the villages. You mentioned about this extremely eco-friendly replacement of the thermoplastics and disposables that you use today. And I'm thrilled by seeing this effort, because I've also been voicing a concern that every New Year's Eve, the entire country celebrates and leaves the country with tons of plastic, tons of disposables, tons of confetti, which is a burden on the earth. So thank you very much for introducing an eco-friendly alternative. I'll come back to you with some more questions, Swatiji, but in the meantime, let me just go to Rachanaji once again. And Rachanaji and Ms. Prabhakar, I'd like to ask this question to you as well. Quite often, there are initiatives that a company wants to carry out. And CSR is an extremely wide amplitude of what all things would constitute a social impact or social change. And you go to your compliance department, the so-called company secretaries, people like us, and we consult our sastras and then say, no, you cannot do it. That there are occasions when there is something laudable that you want to carry out, but because Vinod Kothari says you cannot do it, you're not able to do it. So is this something that you quite often face? Is the law therefore coming as a stumbling block in your trying to do what you think is needed for social impact? Have you ever faced something like this? If yes, how do you take care of it? Rachanaji.
Sure. So so I think since we are so driven to have programs that self-sustain, at least some programs can self-sustain in the long run, we always look at, especially in livelihoods, there is opportunity to use market linkages and business models. So one example is we have a program called Shwet Dhara, which focuses on marginalized dairy farmers across rural Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Karnataka. And here, initially, our entire hypothesis was that there is a gap in access to good quality agri inputs and services, dairy inputs and services at the village level. So where the program comes in is, one is obviously the behavior change element of why it's important to practice certain practices which are hampering the productivity of the milch animals. Second is the business aspect, where we actually we identified village level entrepreneurs called Gram Sakhis. And these women, have a lot of them, actually, most of them had never been outside their homes, especially in Rajasthan. They were all in the Ghungat in very, very patriarchal societies. And our program has slowly helped them get a voice in the community. Some of them, on their own accord, have given up the Ghungat, but it wasn't an easy journey. Now, to self-sustain, we have revenues generated in this program. Now, a non-profit cannot hold revenue beyond a certain limit. It is a non-profit entity, and there's a reason it's called non-profit. Now, so as a CSR head, we have, me and the team wondered, how do we continue to make progress on the financial sustainability in a way that doesn't go against the law? Because the law never says that you cannot have self-sustaining programs. The law never says any of that, but non-profits cannot hold on to the money. So then we thought of farmer producer companies. Can the community own the company themselves so that me or nobody else in the bank is controlling the wealth, but the community and the farmers themselves are controlling the money that they are generating? Now, so we had gone, internally to our concerned secretary, and a lot of people do not see CSR from this perspective of sustainability. So profits in the social sector have been a dirty word, right? Oh, how can you make profit? If you're making profit, then how is it CSR? Well, it is CSR because we are plowing that profit back, and farmers are creating more wealth for themselves from it. So the dilemma there was that what under Schedule 7 can be funded to the NGO, who then will fund the farmer producer company. So, it was a huge, like a chaotic situation that actually happened until we finally got clarity to say that XYZ can come under Schedule 7. Some of it, you will still need an NGO in the mix as a technical partner. So we have the bank, the non-profit partner, and then we have the farmer producer company. Proud to share that after your advice, we've actually now set up and we're running 2 farmer producer companies. It was a roadblock. Now we have a solution for it. But yeah, I mean, we do come across such situations as we innovate.
Thanks a ton. Very, very innovative thoughts. But before I come to Prabhakar sir, Pemi, I would like to circle this question to you because you advise a lot of companies, including some very, very large players in CSR. And this question has come quite often. If a CSR initiative leads to a produce or a profit, is that vitiating the whole spirit of CSR? For example, you grow trees, and trees would result into timber, and the timber would at some stage sell. So the question is the fact that the timber produces some profit, some revenue, does it mean it's not a CSR activity? That's part one, Pemi. And related question to you would be that if the CSR expense results into some cross connection, somewhere remote connection with the company's business model. For example, whosoever IDFC First Bank finances might probably run some current account with or some kind of a savings account with IDFC First Bank. So given the fact that there is a cross connection back with the business, same question perhaps in case of ITC as well. ITC might be doing whatever, let's say cleanliness drive somewhere, but there might be some use of the detergents and the soaps that ITC produces. So if there's some connection back with the business model of the company, does that also vitiate CSR? Pemi, 2 questions. CSR itself resulting into a profit, and CSR having some connection back with the business model of the company. Pemi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And before I answer your question, sir, I would like to take the opportunity to thank each of the panelists for their such kind words and their blessings. And I hope I am up to their wishes, and I keep doing good by, I mean, you being my mentor, of course, I have no doubts on that. So now coming back to your question, the first question being if CSR generates profits. So if my expenditure in CSR generates profits, does that vitiates the the concept of CSR or the intent of CSR? So what is CSR? We are trying to create an impact. That how it should be. We are all talking about that. That when a company spends for a project, they should eye for an impact. Impact in the several areas of Schedule 7, whichever areas it could be. So if, for example, you're saying we plant trees and we have timber, I mean, if that timber is sold, if the timber is put to use, there is a profit. What was the objective when the amount was spent? When the amount was spent for, let's say, planting trees, or let's say, let's take an example of a school, for that matter. Let's say there is some minimal fees which is being generated when the school is being run, right? So if that amount, that revenue is generated, does that creates any negative impact on the objective for running that educational institution? The answer is no. The objective is absolutely met, right? So the only thing is that the profit generation should not be the objective when we do CSR. The objective should be to create that change. As long as the primary objective is that, I think there is no issue at all, and I think the CSR objective is absolutely met. The
And
only
any product or any dividends out of CSR are plowed back into
exactly
CSR itself.
it has to be plowed back to the said project. So there's absolutely no issue in that. And now coming back to the second question, where we are talking about some linkage with the business model of the company. Again, I'll come to one of the exclusions, the explicit exclusions from the CSR or the CSR activities, which states that anything that you do in the normal course of business, right, that's not CSR. So when we choose, when we select, or when we design a project for CSR, we have to, and I think companies do keep in mind the business model. I think the large companies do keep in mind, that they also have a role to play. I mean, their business also has a role to play in that. So the idea should not be to simply get or generate business profits. If it is aligned with the business model, there is no issue at all again. And that's how it should be. Because the idea is not to get, promotions for the business, or, generate name for the business. The business name itself gets a whole lot of recognition when the project is a hit, or when that particular expenditure is being done. I think, sir, my views on this have been.
Yeah, right. Payal, I would come with the question to you as well. Very often people who are engaged in CSR work try to talk about the so-called implementation agencies versus the actual carriers of CSR work, the so-called beneficiaries. And quite often there's this confusion. Is it an implementing agency which has to be, so-called registered with the CSR? By filing a CSR, one has to be 12A registered, ATG registered, and so on. Or is it the entity which is actually carrying the CSR work itself? So how do you resolve that? What's the difference between an implementing agency versus beneficiary? I was getting this question from the audience as well, so I thought I'll just ask you to address this, very common source of confusion. Payal.
Yeah. So the common differentiation factor between implementing agency and beneficiary actually lies in the name itself. Because implementing agency is merely an agency through which a company is carrying out its CSR activities. Implementing agency is not getting the benefits of the funds that the company is parking. It is not deriving the benefits for the ultimate beneficiary as well. So let's say, for to give you an example, let's say we talk about a school. There are students who are being educated in that school, and one would say that the ultimate beneficiaries, therefore, of the school are the students. But the school is being run by an NGO. Had there not been CSR funds being provided by the company, the NGO would have required alternate sources of funding for that. So for the purposes of seeing at the beneficiaries from the viewpoint of the company, the school or the NGO which is running the school becomes the beneficiary, because they are the ones who are deciding how to use the funds, where to use the funds, and how to put it to the social cause that the company has decided to. But when it comes to an implementing agency, they are basically just specialized bodies, or more often than not, an extended arm of the company itself by way of a foundation or a trust, which helps the company in separating its CSR activities and helps them in finding the right NGOs, making the funds available to the NGOs, and maybe interacting with the NGOs. So yeah.
For example, Pukar
Yeah.
is a end user. It's not an implementing agency. That's what you would say. So Pukar doesn't have to go through rigmarole of filing CSR1. If Pukar doesn't have a 12 registration, doesn't mean Pukar cannot carry CSR work. That's a common confusion. Thanks, Wael, for clarifying that. Prabhakar sir, I'll come to you on this. So I was asking about whether there are occasions when a laudable CSR work has been stifled by the ineligibility of the expense in terms of Schedule 7. Have you ever faced situations where you've been told no, you cannot do it because it doesn't fall under permissible CSR expense? Prabhakar sir.
Honestly, no. I think the challenge that very often we face is the eligibility part in terms of whether the organization to whom you will give the funds for implementing, whether they qualify or not. But per se, if I want to do something which is really in the spirit of CSR, I think very often the challenge comes is when you want to retrofit something into CSR, then the legal rules come into a play actually. But if you're doing it in spirit, that will not be the issue. The challenge that we face, Vinodji, is very often on the gray areas, which is in terms of interpretations. And a classic example could be, let's say, I have a partnership with a state government. Now, typically state government will not do a partnership for 1 year. It will be a partnership for 3 years, or a partnership with an institute like IIT Delhi or somebody. Then the confusion comes in is this whole thing of ongoing project. So does it sort of become ongoing, and then do I need to go through the rigmarole of ongoing, etc.? So those up and downs keep happening, but not really a showstopper. Yes, there are certain elements of the rules, etc., which probably needs to be clarified or improved based on the experiences. Like one of the things that comes up is you cannot use the products, company products. Now just look at a very, very strange situation. We work in schools, we provide educational kits, etc. to the children, but I can't use classmate books for that. It's very ironical. I buy from somewhere else and then give, but I can't use classmate books because I want to be totally in compliance. It could be an interpretation issue. Some organizations may take a chance, but we say, no, let's not take any chance. So small things like that are there, but I'm sure they'll also get
I'm sorry to interrupt. Prabhakar ji, please give us your books because we buy notebooks. We'll use your classmates. This was just a light-hearted thing.
Sure.
I was probably going to add that as long as you allow the liberty of choosing which exercise books does the NGO or the actual beneficiary chooses, the fact that he chooses ITC's classmates shouldn't disentitle the expense at all, because that's the choice of the kiska saman leke. I will not be directing, I will not be dictating him. So that's the kind of view that we've commonly held, and that's how we advise. But you're right, quite often companies want to be extra compliant, and they would say, don't buy my books, buy those of my competitor, which is sounding so very logical, but that's how companies quite often do. On the Swati ji, once again, a question on the social change that this country needs, and it's a massive need for a massive country. And I'm sure there is never a state of arrival, because this is a continuous, infinite task that we need to be engaged in. But in terms of your list of the top desirables, what are the few things that you would think need to be done, and need to be done by the corporates engaged in CSR, which would result into the most needed social change over the next few years to make the country a better place to live? Complex question, but I'm sure you can.
Vinodji, I'll try and answer more as a 53-year-old than as a person who's the managing trustee of Pukar. Firstly, let me again reiterate, I am but a speck of dust, and Pukar too. However, I speak as a human on this platform. See, the disparity that we're noticing is this, and this may be terribly undiplomatic to say here, but as soon as the PM Cares Fund was formed, the best of the best and the best of the corporate sector quietly shut down some of the best possible projects simply because they had to divert the funds to a PM Cares Fund. I say it on record, okay? Because their books will also show it. They may not be able to say it. So the one thing all of us need to realize, as I don't even say as people of India, I say as sons and daughters of this soil, because national boundaries are man-made. God or the divine or the universe did not draw these maps for us. So I believe that service is a rent that I pay for being born on earth, not because I'm born in India or was born in Sri Lanka or could have been born in Bhutan. That is not as material as it should be. So why have I brought up that fund? It's because somewhere in corporate India was not able to somehow put across the fact that the projects they were running were so essential and so important, and they should not have been stopped. One. Two, there are 2 points I'd like to make. Savitri ji, later Prabhakar ji, Rachna also mentioned this, that there are these 4 key areas of education and health and rural development and environment. If in the schedule that mentions the permissible activities in CSR, perhaps in the years to come, weightage than other areas. I'm not saying sports is not important, absolutely important, but then that way everything is important. Culture is also important. Literature is also important. But we, just as a woman budgets her home, just as a woman, me as a woman entrepreneur, budget the priorities in my business, perhaps the stage has come in India a decade since CSR became structured in a legal format, that we could perhaps try and give more weightage to areas that society, that the Indian social context needs more. That is one. The second thing is very, very impressed by what Rachna Iyer is doing at IDFC. So somewhere I rightly feel that as it is the corporate sector is extremely overworked, and I totally understand this while I'm saying so. But for those 2 or 3 or 4 people to continue to do CSR work, when I interact with people, I realize that there are some people who are bringing out time and making this their +1. So somebody is doing this as a +1. However, if employees could, in their performance appraisal, be somehow positively motivated to be part of the project, maybe an employee could go only once a year to a remote area. You see, these little interactions change a person's life. I would not have gone to rural Bengal but for Father P.C. Matthew, the then principal of St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, who said, come on, we need to adopt a village. And this I'm talking of is maybe 30 years back, 35 years back. So you see that little change. So these are the few things that I think perhaps will add to a greater depth and add to a greater meaning to this huge yagya that is going on in India. Everybody trying in their own little or big way to try and make a difference to those that are lesser privileged than us.
Wonderfully put. And I must say, we will like to carry those words that you just mentioned. Service is the rent that we pay for being born on this earth. So very wonderfully well put. I'll be circling back to all the panelists with a very, very short and quick question to all of you, starting from Savitri, madam, once again. What is the last 1 minute that you would like to say for the CSR endeavors of companies? Any words of advice, any brief, quick point that any of you would like to say to the companies which spend on CSR? Savitri, madam, first. Very brief, last 1 minute.
Sure. I actually would say that CSR is not just about giving money, it's a hugely satisfying experience. And I'm actually going to share a small story. I was visiting a place in Gujarat a few years ago, about 8, 9 years ago, where the company was doing CSR work. And one of the CSR projects of the company was in providing basic education to women from economically weaker sections of the society. So I went to this particular place, and there were chairs which were placed over there. And the moment I entered the place, it was actually an open area outside a thatched roof hut. And one lady who was about 70 years old, with a beaming smile, almost came running to me about 4 steps away. She came to me with a small slate and a slate pencil in her hand, and she said, I can sign, I can sign. Even as I speak about it today, my eyes well up, and I realized what it is to actually be able to do that. And we don't realize it when we stay in towns. I've been a city bred girl, and this really brought tears to my eyes. And I realized that these small changes that you do through CSR is what actually is an experience that you carry with you. And my one sentence at the end would be, the satisfaction of doing good work is the opportunity to get that
Smile
assignment,
on
to
the
be able
face.
to
Yeah.
do it.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thanks a ton. Prabhakar sir.
I'll just sort of, it's an acronym that I'm talking of. It's PATHS, and let me just elaborate it. I think to me, CSR has to be authentic. That's the A in paths. CSR has to be done with hand, heart, and head together. It's when I say hand, it just becomes a compliance oriented thing. But all three have to be together. So that's the H in the paths. It has to be tangible, which we have discussed. One aspect which we didn't really discuss, I think real impact comes when you work in a partnership mode. It could be partnership with implementation partners, it could be with government, whoever it is. I think it's all about partnership. And the last in the paths, the S really is do CSR where you are building capacity for the beneficiary or the groups to sustain themselves and not get into a donate, keep feeding, keep giving, so to say. So these are the 5 aspects that I would say in terms of my closing remarks.
Excellent. Give them legs, not crutches. Right. Excellent. Sarika ji, your
Yes, sir.
one last advice.
So I would like to just define this in one simple line. I believe that a strong shift being compliant to being compassionate in spirit is required if we really want to bring a positive change to the entire ecosystem around us.
Thanks very much. So wonderfully put. And Rachana madam.
Yes. So I think 3 things from my side. One is I urge a lot of corporate leaders to please look at funding underfunded courses that are stigmatized, such as working with people with mental illness, upskilling persons with disability, focusing on areas that take you 2-3 days to get to. I know it is hard, but I think going deeper into villages is the need of the hour. Second is to co-create. Like Prabhakar ji said, there is so much you can learn when you look at an NGO or an implementation agency as your equal. They are doing what they do. They know their communities best. And I think that co-creation approach is very, very useful for both parties. And third is, and this is really not to diss anybody, but we at least personally at the bank have stopped using the word beneficiaries because no longer are they passive recipients of charity. I think we looked at them as individuals. So we say individuals impacted. This is the first time in the history that the bank's annual report, we've nowhere used the word beneficiaries unless it's for disclosures because it is, I mean, you have to follow your format. So yeah, I think that is it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Swati madam.
Vinodji, I am absolutely overwhelmed by what happened a decade back. So my concluding line will be this. Thank God for these laws. Thank God for CSR. Thank God for all of you. Thank God for your passion, your compassion, and your commitment. Because we on this side of the table know when very quickly, when that terrible cyclone Ayla hit Sundarbans and West Bengal in 2008, there was no way. It was so, I mean, one worked in the Sundarbans for 8 to 9 months. It was difficult because it wasn't as structured. And then when Amphan hit Bengal, the worst in 350 years to hit Calcutta, it was so much more structured. So yes, thank God for all of it. And thank God for this discussion. Thank God, Pammy, you wrote that book. Thank God, you, Payal, you helped her. So thank God.
Thanks a ton. Before we close, I just would like to address a question which has come from our audience. I have a question from Mr. Minesh Agarwal. And my colleagues can see if there are any other questions on YouTube channel as well. The question is about what's an ongoing project. So Pammy, I think this question rightly goes to you. What would constitute an ongoing project? And I think Prabhakarji also was mentioning there's always confusion on what is ongoing. So if you can maybe help clear the confusion. May not get
Sure.
into the exact example, but what exactly will be the feature of an ongoing project?
Right. And I'll just start. I'll take the same example. For example, if we take a building or a construction of a building which goes into maybe a school, or let's say construction of a specific wards in a hospital. So these are time-taking projects, but are for the objective for which CSR has been brought up. So these projects, because they take time, the funds are not required at one go. The funds are required in tranches, and therefore any project that requires a time to complete for more than one financial year, they are termed as ongoing projects. Any project which is not spanning over for more than 1 year financial year, they are in the nature of, like, one time activity, or maybe let's say just maybe you can say maybe training the truck drivers for road safety. Let's say, we keep a small target of, let's say, 50 truck drivers or 100 truck drivers. That's surely something which can be met in one financial year. So that's a case of a not ongoing project. On the other hand, if we take a target of, let's say, 1,000 truck drivers or 5,000 truck drivers in a project, and we prepare a blueprint in such a manner that it is going to span for more than one financial year, so the funds will be required in tranches, and therefore at the end of one financial year, it is not possible to completely deploy the funds, or maybe give the funds for that particular project. And you can therefore use that particular unspent amount lying at the end of one financial year for the next 3 financial years. So that's what the meaning of ongoing project is. So we had a question from Minesh Agarwalji on the fact that if my project is not ongoing, and if I'm left with any unspent amount at the end of the financial year, will I have to give it to the funds under Schedule 7? So for that, I just had one point that, let's say if I've given the money to someone who's a beneficiary, or that individual who actually deserves that, is a deserving recipient of that fund, and that fund is given to the project itself. It's not lying with any implementing agency. It's with the beneficiary, just for the clarity of everyone. So therefore, there is no question of any unspent amount. Everything is done. You just have to keep monitoring that the funds are utilized for the said project. And that's it. There is no question of any parking of the funds in the unspent CSR account, or putting it under
which would mean if the money is going to the beneficiary, the money is not completely spent by the beneficiary. While it's a point that you would like to monitor, because we had given you X amount of money to be spent, but the money has not been spent. But there's no question of funneling the money back to the company in terms of unspent money, because the money has already been spent. Right. Money is gone irretrievably from the company to the beneficiary. If the money was to stay with the implementing agency, that's unspent money. But money which has gone to the beneficiary, even though not actually spent by the beneficiaries, not for the company, it's not an unspent money. There's another question which, Pemi, I guess you or Payal might like to answer, which is capacity building expense for the NGO. For instance, if Swati Gautam's Pukar Trust was to, let's say, spend money in capacity building of its own volunteers, and let's say company decides to bear that also as a part of its CSR contribution, will that be taken as capacity building or establishment cost, or is it a part of CSR expense itself? Money given to the beneficiary for capacity building by the beneficiary itself.
Right. So here we are talking about a particular NGO which runs the project itself. If you're talking about Pukar, we're talking about the NGO running the projects itself. So if I am saying, for example, if again I might just be taking examples of schools maybe, but just to keep it simple, if I train up teachers there, maybe, make them more equipped with the latest IT or, the smart school systems, right? So if I'm putting money for that particular purpose, that's very much part of CSR and not capacity building. That's not an administrative expense for which there's a cap of 5% of my funding of
capacity
CSR.
building therefore is internal capacity building. If it's going to the beneficiary is using it for capacity building as well. That's like the that's like the actual CSR expense and not hit by the limit of 5%. We have had a wonderful discussion today. I must thank all the panelists for the wonderful deliberations today, for spending time this evening, and we are all overwhelmed by the excellent words of congratulations that you had for my colleagues Pemi and Payal. We are so grateful to all of you for having spent your time today. We are also grateful to all the participants who've been with us throughout this session, including those who are participating on YouTube. Thanks very much, and with this, wish you all very, very best. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vinodji.
Thanks, sir. Thanks very
To
much.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Have a nice evening.
Thanks. Sarika ma'am, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Savitri ma'am, thanks a ton. And see you soon in Chennai. Thanks everyone.
Recording.